Hello, students. How are you guys all doing? It's Mr. K again. We're going to go through the next several pages worth of answers here as far as our OST take home little packet is concerned. Um, yeah, hopefully you guys are all doing well, staying safe, staying healthy, all of that fun stuff. In the last video, we went ahead and went over the the first 3 pages of this packet. So if you've not already taken a look at those videos, um, I'll link it below. I'm pointing downward right now, although you can't see that. But in any case, please make sure you go ahead and take a look at that video for the first 3 pages worth of answers here to make sure we are staying productive and remembering our biology stuff. As well, make sure you are taking a look at those Khan Academy videos. Those are incredibly helpful and just a way to make sure you're hearing the vocabulary and all of that fun stuff so that when we come back, we at least have heard the terms used, right? So there's that. As of now, no new updates as far as when we're coming back or if we're coming back or any of that fun stuff, but hopefully soon enough. But in any case, we're going to go ahead and get into the questions here. These have to do with genetics and Punnett squares and all of that fun stuff. I'm not going to draw out any of the Punnett squares here. I figure, well, we know how to do that. And also the Khan Academy videos are a great reference for that. If you'd like any specific tutorials in terms of any of these specific questions where a Punnett square is involved, if you'd like me to draw that out, I can do so in another video. Just let me know about that and we can do that. But again, more than enough waffling. Let's get to the actual questions here. First one. How did Mendel's studies in genetics differ from earlier studies of breeding and inheritance? So if you recall Gregor Mendel, he's the guy that messed around with the pea plants. And the way his studies were different is C. His work was more quantitative, as in it was more measurable. Okay? Before Mendel really wasn't easy to measure all of those things, but he did it in such a way that it was more quantitative. So there you go. For the second one, a true breeding fruit fly would be blank for a certain characteristic. So a couple different options here: homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, heterozygous. Any of the above can be true breeding, or A and B, which in this case is the correct answer. Either homozygous situation here would count as true breeding. Okay? As in the same allele. That's what that term means. Not something we explicitly talked about earlier, but there you go. Any kind of animal that's true breeding, not really the same thing as purebred, but you can think of it as more of a purebred kind of animal. But any kind of homozygous traits would count as true breeding. Looking at number 3, let me see here. Yeah. When looking at the inheritance of a single characteristic, Mendel found that a cross between two true breeding peas, between purple and white, for example, always yielded a blank in the F2 generation. The F2 generation being the next generation here. Or F2 actually meaning the follow-up, because you have the parents' generation, F1, and then F2. But the answer for this question would be D, a 3-to-1 phenotypic ratio. If you're like, wait, why isn't it C? That's because with C, that would be for the F1 generation, but D would be F2. Okay? Because once those 1 to 2 to 1 offspring interbreed and all of that kind of fun stuff, you would arrive ultimately at a 3-to-1 ratio. Number 4 is an easy one, not allowed to get this one wrong. Alternative forms of genes for a particular characteristic are called alleles. Alleles, ladies and gentlemen. Not allowed to miss that. That's an easy one. All right, skipping ahead to number 6. Mendel made some crosses where he looked at 2 characteristics at once. Round yellow peas crossed with wrinkled green peas, for example. He did this because he wanted to find out And the answer here is B. Whether or not those particular characteristics were inherited together or separately. Okay? As in the round and the color and the wrinkled characteristic. He wanted to know, do those go together or do those assort independently? Which you've heard that term used before. But in this case, B. All right. Number 7. A pea plant with purple flowers is heterozygous for flower color, meaning it has one of each allele, right? Its genotype is capital P, lowercase p. The capital P and lowercase p alleles in the pea plant cells are located, the answer here would be B, at corresponding locations on the homologous chromosomes. If you recall, before chromosomes separate, either in mitosis or meiosis, although in this case we're definitely talking about meiosis, but the homologous pairs are when the chromosomes kind of are aligned together down the middle of the chromosome during metaphase, and those locations of the actual genes are in corresponding pairs on those chromosomes, as in it's in one spot on the chromosome to the left and in the corresponding location in the chromosome to the right. So in any case, that is number 7. Moving on to number 8. When an individual has both IA and IB blood group alleles, both genes are expressed and the individual has group AB blood. This is an example of, and the answer here, codominance, as in both characteristics are expressed. In this case, the blood group would have both of those antibodies, both A and B. That's an example of codominance, not a situation in, say, this previous example right here, where you have either one allele or the other allele, right, as in capital or lowercase, or in number 6, where you have the wrinkled characteristic or the color. In this case, both traits are shown here. So that's an example of codominance. Okay. Number 9. How many genes are there on one chromosome? The answer here is D. There are thousands of genes on one particular chromosome. Yeah, millions isn't the worst answer, honestly, but it is closer to thousands. Going on to number 10. Which of the following is not true of linked genes? And for number 10, E is the correct answer. They are not relatively rare. Most genes are not unlinked, okay? So linked genes are not rare. And most genes do happen to be linked. So E is the correct answer here. Remember, the question asks which is not true, okay? For number 11. Morgan and his students were able to map the relative positions of genes on fruit fly chromosomes by, and in this case, you would respond with how someone would do that. In this case, Morgan and his students, right? Answer here would have to be C. You'd have to take the fruit flies and see what the offspring generations would look like. And then from there, you kind of work backwards, right? If the offspring look a certain way, that means they inherit those alleles from their parents. And so you can figure out what exactly the genes of the parents must be based on looking at the offspring. Other answers here don't really make sense, although some of them are relatively fun. A says coloring the chromosomes, right? That's fun. B says scrambling the chromosomes. Not sure what that really is referring to. D would be really difficult, transplanting chromosomes. That's more a thing in bacteria. There's specific methods you can do there. Pretty hard to do that in eukaryotic cells, from what I understand. Perhaps I'm wrong on that. I don't know. You guys can at me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. And then E says looking at crosses that showed independent assortment. Really depends on how many genes you're actually looking at. But in this case, if you're trying to map the positions of seemingly all the genes for the fruit fly chromosomes, Yeah, good luck with that. So we'll go with C here. 12 is another easy one. You should know this. The sex chromosomes of a human female are blank. The sex chromosomes of a human male are, then there's another blank. So the correct answer here is A. Females have the XX chromosomes, and males have the XY chromosomes. And you'd be able to tell this by looking at a karyotype of any specific individual, where all the genes and, well, okay, that's a bad way to put it, where all the chromosomes are visible all at the same time. All right, so females biologically would have the XX set of chromosomes, and males biologically would have the XY set of chromosomes. Okay, skipping ahead to 14. The most common lethal genetic disease in the United States, lethal meaning you can die from it. The answer here would be B. Whoops, didn't highlight. Cystic fibrosis is the most common one. Sickle cell is pretty common, not necessarily lethal. Same thing with hemophilia. Huntington's, I don't know too much about that, and I don't really know much about PKU either. But cystic fibrosis is the most lethal genetic disease of this particular bunch. Moving on to 16. This isn't really a topic we've talked too much about in class. There are various procedures that can be used to detect genetic disorders before birth. Among the tests discussed in the chapter, which of course we didn't read, blank is the least invasive, while blank carries the highest risk. And this is what you would do basically to look at a fetus before it's born, right? So the least invasive way to do that would be, which one here? Would be ultrasound, obviously, right? So of all of these, yeah, ultrasound would be the least one. And then, how would we even say that? Fetoscopy? I don't know. But in any case, in that situation, you'd actually be taking tissue from the fetus, right? So in that sense, that's obviously invasive. You have to go into the body in that case. But ultrasound imaging, not invasive. So, going on to the essay questions. Yes, you were supposed to do these. So, I'll go ahead and read the question, and then I will, I'll briefly describe the answer, and see if your answer sounds anything like my answer, right? So for the first one, explain why Gregor Mendel was able to figure out the principles of heredity, while many investigators before and some after Mendel failed to do so. As in, why was he successful and other people's weren't? So Mendel studied pea plants, which we've talked about a lot at this point. They're relatively easy to grow, and there's a lot of different varieties of them. And he studied different characteristics that occur in two different forms, right? So he had controlled experiments where those pea plants were mated, and he kept records of those results. And finally, he designed experiments where he tested and retested which things would actually be passed down to the next generation. So because of all that, and because of his very quantitative methods, he was able to be successful, right? He used, in this case, a plant that was easy to control for. And yeah, there you go. For number 2, if you flip 2 coins, the probability you'll get heads is 1/4, but the probability you get 1 head and 1 tail is 1/2. Explain why. So a little bit of math here. This has to do with independent events and dependent events. In this case, flipping 2 different coins are 2 independent events. So either coin being heads would be 1/2, right? Either coin being tails would be 1/2. But when you introduce the second coin, now you have 2 different independent events, right? So each flip of a coin is independent, probability of 1/2. Probability of getting 2 heads, in that case, that's the product of the individual probabilities. As in, you'd have to multiply the 1/2 for the first coin times 1/2 for the second coin, which means you have 1/4. Okay. Then the probability of the first coin coming up heads and the probability of the second coin coming up tails is still the probability uh, of the two multiplied, right? So you're still at 1/4. But um, there's another way you could do that, obviously. Coin 1 could be tails and coin 2 could be heads. No matter, you still get 1/4, right? So, yeah. Two different ways that you can get one head and one tail. Probability that any particular event occurs two different ways is the sum of the separate probabilities of how many ways can actually happen. So the 1/4 plus the 1/4, which is 1/2. Okay? For number 3, why are organisms such as pea plants and fruit flies better subjects for genetic studies than human beings? Easiest answer, they're cheap. Okay? To do studies on animals that are bigger is expensive because you have to feed them, right? You have to have space to keep them and all of that fun stuff. But fruit flies, you don't need a lot of space. They're cheap and they have a short life cycle, as in you can see the entire life cycle of a fruit fly within a couple days or maybe hours. I actually have no idea how long a fruit fly lives. I imagine it's not very long. Pea plants as well, relatively short, right? The season that they grow isn't particularly long. So there's that. And it's easy to control the breeding. So all of these are good examples here. And also you can add both are selected species. So there's a lot of offspring, right? So they reproduce quickly and there's a lot of offspring, so you can see which traits are passed down. For number 4, what determines a human sex? Describe 2 other systems of sex determination in different organisms. We alluded to this in number 12 earlier with the chromosomes. That's the first way to do it. So humans who inherit X chromosomes from both the mom and the dad would happen to be female. Humans who inherit the X chromosome from mom and a Y chromosome from dad would happen to be male. So there's that. This works differently in other organisms, right? Not all organisms happen to have things work out like this. Let me think of some examples. That I can't really think of any examples off the top of my head of other animals here. But I know with grasshoppers, there's a specific thing that happens there. Same thing with butterflies, and there's some fish. I can't think of specific examples off the top of my head, but there are other ways that organisms determine what the sex of offspring would actually be, right? But in humans, it does happen to be the XX or XY chromosomes. So moving on to let me label these pages. Page 1, we just finished page 2 worth of questions here. So moving on to the applying your knowledge questions, which is the next 2 pages. Okay. So I'm going to go and label those quickly. Page 3 and page 4. We'll go ahead and wrap up with these. But the first question here, on the second page, under the applying your knowledge, asks us, a brown mouse is mated with a white mouse. All the offspring are brown. If 2 of these brown offspring, all of them are brown. If 2 of the brown offspring are mated, what fraction of the offspring will be white? Okay. And the answer here is C. 1/4 of them are, the likelihood of them being white is 1/4. Okay. And that's because even though the offspring are brown, they would carry the recessive allele here. Again, not going to draw out the Punnett square, but if we assume brown is the dominant allele and white is the recessive allele, the brown mouse from the first sentence, as in this one, It is more than likely heterozygous dominant for brown color, and the white mouse would probably be homozygous recessive. So in that case, 1/4. Okay. Although I don't see why you couldn't assume that the brown mouse is homozygous dominant and therefore none. Yeah, we'll say none's also an accepted answer here. I don't see why the brown mouse would have to be heterozygous. It could be homozygous dominant, in which case it wouldn't have a recessive allele to pass down. So none of the offspring would be white. Yeah, I'm thinking about that too hard. Okay, let's move on to the third page of questions here. Yeah. Okay, suppose you wanted to know, oh God, it goes back to question 1, and here I am trying to not think about that one. Suppose you wanted to know the genotype of one of the brown F2 mice in question 1. The easiest way to do so, oh, yeah, D. Made it with the white mouse. And that you see, just take a look at what color the offspring would be. So you would know exactly what the offspring of, well, not the offspring, you would know exactly what the genotype of the brown mouse is, right? Either it'd have to be homozygous or heterozygous. In any case, it does have the dominant allele. And so if you made it with the white mouse, if the offspring is white, or any of the offspring happen to be white, you would know it's heterozygous dominant. If the offspring are not white, you would know it's heterozygous dominant. So pretty clever. All right, third one here. Some dogs bark while trailing. Others are silent. The barker gene is dominant. The silent gene is recessive. The gene for normal tail is dominant over the gene for screw or curly tail. A barker dog with a normal tail who is heterozygous for both characteristics is mated with another dog of the same genotype. What fraction of the offspring will be barkers with screw tails? So this is another Punnett square, 2 different traits here. So this would be your dihybrid Punnett square. So we might have to do a video on this later if you guys want, if this is a tricky one. But in this case, you would do the 4x4 Punnett square, right? So perhaps you don't know how to do that one, but in any case, we can talk about that later. But the answer here is C. 3 out of the 16 would have that characteristic. Okay. Another Punnett square for number 4. 2 heterozygous tall pea plants with purple flowers are crossed. Okay. The probability that one of their offspring will have white flowers is 1/4. The probability that one of the offspring will be short is also 1/4. What is the probability that one of their offspring will be short with white flowers? So another Punnett square here. The answer you should get is B, as in 1 out of 16 should have those conditions in your Punnett square. Again, if that's a problem, if you're not able to do that Punnett square, please let me know, and we can do that together. For number 5, a young what? A young unmarried woman had a baby and wished to collect child support from the father. Her blood group is AB. Oh my God. The baby's blood group is A. There are 2 possible fathers, Jim, whose blood group is A, and Michael, whose blood group is O. Which man could be the father based on the Oh, okay. Whew. Okay, that's funny. Which could be the father based on the characteristics? Okay, so the baby has type A blood. The mom has AB. One of the possible fathers has type A blood. The other has type O. Either one could be the father based on the evidence we have here. Reason being, this A that the baby has for blood type could come from the mom or could come from the dad, and Michael being O would not actually contribute anything to the kid's type A blood group. But it still could be there because there is no antigen or antibody markers in type O blood. So I guess our guy Michael's not out of the woods yet, right? So either one could be the father still. Okay? Not enough evidence to exclude Michael, in other words. Okay? Not looking good for Jim, though. Oh, what a silly question. All right. Moving on to 8. So a bit of a long one. Okay. In fruit flies, the allele for red eyes is dominant. The allele for purple eyes is recessive. Normal gray body is dominant, and black body is recessive. A geneticist mated a heterozygous red-gray male with the purple-black female. Well, that's a lot to keep track of. She predicted that there would be 4 phenotypes of offspring in equal numbers, but she was wrong. Instead, 48% of the offspring were red-gray, 46 were purple-black, so pretty much the same there, 3% were red-black, and 3% were purple-gray. She concluded that in the male, red and gray genes were linked, and in the female, purple and black genes were linked. If this is the case, how would you account for the red, black, and purple, gray offspring? Yeah, that's a lot. The answer here, to account for that, we could say crossing over occurred during meiosis. Okay? So anytime you get seemingly random variations or anything like that, it's usually a result of crossing over and this occurs in meiosis, of course, during the metaphase. I believe in metaphase 2. Don't quote me on that. It could be metaphase 1. But in any case, when the homologous sister chromosomes, when the pairs are lined up together, some of the legs of the chromosome can switch genes, right? That's called crossing over. So that can occur, and that can be responsible for some of the random changes here. And moving on to the last, oh god, there's a lot of essays. Moving on to the last page here. This is page 4 of the patterns of inheritance questions. So if you can't find this in the packet, there you go. On a pedigree tracing the inheritance of PKU, a horizontal line joins a black square and a half black circle. So think of a pedigree here. Remember, we have the squares and the circles. The horizontal line would mean that they happen to be a couple having children. What fraction of this couple's children would you expect to suffer from PKU? So the square is black, meaning they have PKU. And the circle is half black, meaning carrier, right? So the likelihood of passing that on would be C, 1/2. Because you're going to for sure get one of the alleles from, in this case, the father, because it's a black square, so shaded in. So they have the condition, which means capital letter, capital letter. So the kids are guaranteed to get one capital letter at least, right? Because that's all dad has to give as far as alleles are concerned. And the mom would be a half black circle, meaning 50-50 chance to pass on a dominant allele or a recessive allele, which means the kids are guaranteed to get a dominant allele from dad, and 50-50 chance. So 50% chance likelihood of getting PKU or inheriting PKU. And then the last multiple choice question for number 12. Which of the following would be most useful for preventing a particular genetic disorder? Most useful would be being able to identify carriers. Okay? If you're able to identify carriers of a disease, well, now you know who is most likely to pass it on. Obviously for C, right, a test that can determine whether a fetus suffers from this disorder. In that case, you're not actually preventing, right, because that's too late. It has been passed on. And D is a pretty good answer, actually. I like that. Yeah, but in any case, B is the best answer here. We're not going to get too deep into that. So for the essay questions, we'll go ahead and go through these. Yeah, I'll try to keep the explanations pretty simple. Again, for the ones that are involving a Punnett square, please let me know if you need these Punnett squares drawn out, and we can do so. Okay, so first essay question here. 2 apparently normal parents have a daughter who suffers from... Oh, God, I don't even want to pronounce that. A gamma globulinemia. Damn. An inherited defect of the immune system, which is supposed to protect the body from infection. Use a Punnett square to show how 2 normal parents could have a child affected with an inherited disease. What are the parents' genotypes? The daughter's genotype. What is the probability that a second daughter would also have a gamma globulinemia? Okay. So, this is a fairly easy question. Both parents have to be carriers for this disease for the daughter to have it. So both parents would have to be heterozygous. Heterozygous dominant. Okay? Both would have to be heterozygous dominant. So yes. So you could say capital A, lowercase a, right? And so the daughter would have to be homozygous recessive. So lowercase a, lowercase a. And so if you draw out the Punnett square, you'll see there's a 1 in 4 chance of getting the condition where a kid has both lowercase letters. Okay. So for number 2, a pea plant with purple flowers and green pods is crossed with the pea plant that has white flowers and yellow pods. All the offspring have purple flowers and green pods. If 2 of these F1 peas are crossed, what phenotypes, will be seen in the F2 generation and in what proportions? Okay, so in case this is confusing, you have your parents, then you have your F1 generation, and then you have your F2 generation. Okay, so this question is talking about if you cross members of the F1 generation, what are you going to get in the F2 generation and in what proportion? So if you do the Punnett square, you'll see 9 out of the 16 options you're going to get are going to be purple and green. 3 out of 16 should be purple and yellow. 3 out of 16 should be white and green. And 1 out of the 16 should be white and yellow. So that should be in your fancy dihybrid cross Punnett square. Okay? All right, number 3. Freckles is dominant. No freckles is recessive. A man with freckles and a woman with no freckles have 3 children with freckles and 1 with no freckles. So, what are the genotypes of everybody based on this condition, right? Based on freckles. So the man would have to be heterozygous here. So capital F, lowercase f, assuming F stands for freckles, right? The wife would be homozygous recessive. So the wife doesn't have freckles, right? So lowercase f. And the children with freckles would have to be heterozygous dominant. So capital F, lowercase f, meaning they pass on the trait for no freckles. And those without freckles would have to be homozygous recessive. Yeah, homozygous recessive. Lowercase f. Okay? So, number 4. The inheritance of flower color in snapdragons illustrates incomplete dominance. When a red dragon, or snapdragon, is crossed with the white one, all the offspring are pink. Roses are similar in this regard. What offspring would be produced? Hang on. When a red snapdragon is crossed with a white one, all the offspring are pink. What offsprings would be produced in what proportions if two of these pink snapdragons were crossed? What offspring would be produced in what proportion if a pink snapdragon was crossed with a white one? So, incomplete dominance, incomplete dominance is rather tricky to kind of calculate. But if you were to take a pink snapdragon and cross it with a pink snapdragon, there'd be 1/4 chance of red, 1/2 pink, and 1/4 white. Okay? If you cross the pink and the white, you'll have 1/2 chance of pink, 1/2 chance of white. So again, just a Punnett square. Okay? And in this case, it's two different Punnett square. I'm looking to see if 5 here's another child support question. A man whose blood group is A and a woman whose blood group is B have a son whose blood group is O. What are their genotypes? What is the probability of the couple's next child having blood group O? Okay. So the man would have to be, let me think here. The man would have to be I with a capital A. And the woman would have to be I with a capital B. So the probability of having a child with, group B, would have to be 1/4. Okay? Again, it's a Punnett square. But yes, have to be 1/4. Okay, for number 6. Recall that some characteristics, such as skin color, appear to be controlled by several genes. This creates a continuum of variation. If this polygenetic explanation for the inheritance of human skin pigmentation is correct, how do the skin colors of the following 4 individuals compare? Which of the couples would have children in the widest range of skin colors? Why? So couple 1 would be lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b, capital C, and lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b, and capital C. And then for couple 2, they're listed here as well. So a bit tricky, as now it's even more complicated Punnett square. So you don't really have to be able to do Punnett squares with 3 different genes in there, right? Because we're assuming these don't all assort independently either. But in any case, all 4 individuals here have about the same skin color, right? Couple 2 would have skin color with the widest possible range of colors, from all capital letters to all lowercase letters. And couple 1 would only have children ranging from homozygous recessive for A, homozygous dominant for B, homozygous dominant for C, to homozygous recessive for A, homozygous recessive for B, and homozygous dominant for C. Okay? So, difficult question. You don't really have to worry too much about that. You won't see anything like that on the OST. That's a bit more complicated. Yeah, these next ones are particularly complicated as well. At least, well, this is really the last question here. So I'll do the last one here, just kind of to flex. But again, this is a bit more complicated of a question than really what you have to do. This is much more of a college genetics kind of question. So those of you lucky enough to be going into the medical professions eventually. In fruit flies, the allele for red eyes is dominant over the allele for pink eyes. Straight wings is dominant over curly wings. Imagine that a red-eyed, straight-winged fly that is heterozygous for both characteristics is mated with a fly with pink eyes and curly wings. Predict the offspring that would be predicted by this cross. So genotypes, phenotypes, fraction of each, and if these two genes were on different chromosomes. When a geneticist actually carried out this mating, the offspring were as follows: 49% red-eyed with straight wings, 49% pink-eyed and curly wings, 1% red eyes, curly wings, 1% pink eyes, straight wings. Does this agree with your prediction? How would you explain the results? Okay. So my particular prediction here would be 1/4 red eyes with straight wings. So this would be a heterozygous dominant situation, as in capital R, lowercase r, capital S, lowercase s. 1/4 red eyes and curly wings. So capital R, lowercase s, lowercase s. 1/4 pink eyes and straight wings. So lowercase r, capital S, lowercase s. And 1/4 pink eyes and curly wings. So straight, homozygous, recessive for both conditions. So what the actual results of the cross indicate is that the genes for eye color and the genes for wing shape are linked, as in one is influencing the other. In the heterozygous pair, as in capital R and capital S, they're probably on one chromosome, and lowercase r and lowercase s are also probably on one chromosome, as in on the homologous chromosome. Most gametes would be capital R, capital S, and lowercase r, lowercase s, but crossing happened to result in a small percentage of the capital R, lowercase s, and lowercase r, capital S gametes actually being produced. Okay? So they're linked traits, basically. So that's how we would explain the results here. Alrighty. So that is up to page 7 of the packet. So today we went ahead and started on page 5 of the overall packet. No, not page 5. Page 4 of the overall packet. Through to page 7. Okay? So make sure you check your answers. See which ones you got wrong. And if my explanations are not particularly helpful to you, and you actually want to see the Punnett squares drawn out or anything like that, please do let me know. You can send me an email, or you can post a comment to this video, or you can stop by the Twitch and anything like that, and I can answer some of these questions for you in real time if you need a little bit more explanation. But all right, everybody, I hope you are staying safe, and you're not dying of boredom, basically. So make sure you stay safe, stay sane, read some books, play some video games, all of those things. And hopefully I will see you guys soon. Yeah. So I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you check out the video. See ya.